All right, welcome everybody. There's only a few people in the room here. I'm not sure how many people's online, but welcome to the July 2022 Space Association meeting. Got a fair bit of stuff tonight. Obviously, the big story about James Webb Space Telescope, and we've got our specialist in the room here, Andrew, and he's going to give us a full deep dive on that. So I've just finished dinner, or most of us have. I'm just going to do a quick association business roundup, then some Australian and international news, and then we're going to have a look at James Webb Space Telescope first light content. So he's got some deep dive and interesting content for us tonight, and he's also going to do some planetary and space science. Is that right? I'm not sure. And then we're going to be out of here probably about 9:15. So as people may or may not be familiar, the Space Association does run a weekly radio show on Southern FM and also live stream called The Space Show. And that's also available on a podcast. So probably the thing we've been speaking about over the last few months, and we've sort of moved it into action, is we did run our member survey back in, what was it, May, Mark? May, I think. So we got the results into that. The committee had a bit of a look at that. And so we've developed some initial plans, and we're looking forward to your input. So basically the questions were, or the key questions were, sorry, a question was about project. We've got some funds in the organisation which continue to grow each year. So the concept is, what do we do with those funds? Just watch them grow forever, or do we do something with them? So the thought was we'd ask the members what they thought we should do with them. So some sort of raw results. I think Michael might have gone through a high-level overview last month. Mike, did you do that at the meeting, or was it the committee meeting? Yeah. Oh, well, the general meeting. So we got, I can't remember, how many responses did we get to the? 37. We got 37 responses back to the survey. So there was some options, drop-down options given around this project subject, and the results are as follows: that the association should fund a payload experiment to fly aboard an Australian-built satellite into Earth orbit, a collaborative space project with another established Australian space outreach group or STEM organisation, a major space event in person or online, such as a Space Up conference, or a student scholarship in the space field. So the results out of those numbers there on the right-hand side of that column. So we haven't made any decisions based on any of that, but what we have done as a committee to move things forward is ask for requests for proposals. So the committee is not going to dictate to the association and drive the project ourselves. We want the members or someone that's highly motivated to make something happen come to us and say, I want to do this, it's going to cost this, we need this resources, we need those people. So as a result, we'll be sending out tomorrow this request for proposal. And once again, it's not locked in that it's going to be accepted or it's going to happen or anything like that. But basically the RP will basically seek to get a reasonably detailed understanding of what your idea is. The overview, the objective, the timeline, the budgets, what partnerships might be involved, risks and benefits, and team members. Now, I'm going to apologise straight away because there's probably some flowchart people out there, they're going to fall off their chair, but I did a flowchart. I don't know anything about flowcharts. So the idea is we might get a few RFPs come into the committee, and the committee will take a look at those. And we don't want it to be war and peace, but we want it to be more than let's do this. So the RFPs will come into the committee and we will take a look at them. And based on the initial overview, we'll sort of work out whether it looks even practical. Like, you know, if you said, well, let's launch a man from space off the top of the art centre in Melbourne, well, that's probably not going to happen. So we'll knock that one on the head. But if you got something more realistic, well, we might go forward to the next stage. Then what we'll do is, if we do end up adopting or supporting a project, we would expect, and it would be part of the commitment that would be made, is to feedback ongoing status reports, updates. How's it going? Are you meeting your KPIs and your objectives? Are you within budget? Are you X, Y, Z, Z, Z? So we'll then be going back and forward to see if it's actually working out as we want it to, and we're going to have it approve. So basically then, once we've got some more detail about this particular project that you're proposing and the progress you've made on the proposal, because the RFP is not going to be the proposal, it's going to be an initial overview, we then may or may not approve it. And then we'll achieve the project and be out of there. So once again, flowchart people are probably having a heart attack right now, but sorry about that. So the idea now is we're going to have this RFP sent to members this week. It's going to be an online thing. We will send it to you. There are questions you can ask for clarification if you want, and just send into this email address, spaceflight@space.asn.au. Then the first round submissions, we'd like to get in by midnight, August 21st, which is actually the night before the next public meeting. So we figured that might be a reasonable amount of time. You've got a month. You can put your head around what you might want to do, put a little bit of detail in there, make it realistic, have a look at the next month. And, you know, that'd be a good opportunity then to ask more questions and clarification. Once again, once we have these proposals in and we've got a reasonable understanding of what your idea is, we might ask further questions, clarifications, etc., etc. We'd like to have the preliminary committee approval announced at our September meeting. Whether that's realistic or not, well, we'll see. I don't know. So if you give you a quick idea of what this is, some screen snaps of the RFP. And once again, it's an online thing. You go there, you complete the information. There's mandatory fields, name, all those contact details, which you'd expect. Then there's some, probably hard to read, but the project name, what do you want to do and why, what do you hope the project would achieve? And then there's some other more detailed questions about what it looks like, how it works, who's involved, what partnerships, what etc. So it gives you an opportunity to give us a reasonable taste of what your idea might be. And once again, based on that, we can then go back and maybe ask some clarifying questions, or you can also come to us and ask for questions as well. So once again, that will come out tomorrow.
Peter, is there any reason why, perhaps through the radio show, this shouldn't be an open question to the general public as well?
Yeah, well, that's a good question.
Just for ideas, at least.
That's right. I don't believe there's any reason why we should limit the RFP to just members. So that's a good point. What we thought we'd do as a first stage, we'd send to members and then somehow or other expand that out. And once again, the radio show is probably a good venue. The Facebook page might be a good venue. We do want to have, well, the ideal to have Australian-based people. I mean, you could have some guy from California saying, well, you could do this, but we want to keep it local involvement, local people. Now, it might be the guy from California says, why don't you talk to the guy at RMIT, because I know this guy and he'll kick this along. That's fine. Happy to do that. Happy to consider it. So, yeah, you're dead right. Good point. All right, so that's kind of that at this stage. And once again, if you get the RFP and you think that Fred Bloggs over at Flinders University might be into doing something, forward it to them. All right, and they can do a proposal as well. Yep. All right, so moving on from that, this December, as people may or may not know, is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 17 mission, which is the final lunar landing mission in the series, and that took place in December. So we're toying with an idea of having an event of some description. It won't be as big as and elaborate as the Apollo 11 one we did 3 years ago at the Sun. But the Sun are all over this. They're happy to support us in whatever we want to try and do. We're looking for some content. We're on the tail of some good content, a really good film. We just need to work out the legalities and costs and stuff like that. But it's not a Paramount Pictures thing. It's I don't even know where they're based, but it's a really good film. So I think it'll really be nice. So we're not expecting huge numbers, and we might have 30 or 40 people. So the good thing about the Sun is they've got a range of different size cinemas. So we can start off at the baby cinema, and if it goes berserk, we can move up to the big ones. Who knows? But the idea at this point will be on the 10th of December. And it'll be an afternoon, probably starting at noon and finishing about 5 maybe, and then we shoot off and have a dinner together or something like that. And we might even fire a rocket. This is my Estes flying Saturn V. I flew it back in 2014 for the 45th anniversary of Apollo 11, and I'm proposing to fly it again in December for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17, conditional on weather and whatever. And Angelo DeGrazzi's got a bunch of rockets as well. He's going to roll out a few as well. So bit of fun. So we go to the park, fly a couple of rockets, and then go off to the cinema. Anyway, we'll see what happens after we retrieve them from the trees. So once again, the Sun Theatre is in Yarraville, and just over the Westgate Bridge. Turn right and you're pretty much there. Some nice cafes and restaurants around, and the people there love us and we love them. Very supportive. So from about noon on December 10th, so put that into your calendar. Once again, memberships, Space Association memberships. Thank you very much. There's been quite a good response of people renewing over the last month, because when we first started off, it was always renewals in July. So people have been here for a little while. That renewal cycle comes around. So there's been quite a few. If you haven't done so yet, please come and rejoin. If you're not a member, please consider joining. And if you have been a member and you want to come back, we'd love to see you. All right. Once again, the schedule, 4th Monday of the month. So that means our next meeting here is August 22nd. And looks like December 12 will be our end of year meeting. So next meeting, August 22. Oh, there's a good picture of all the different see-throughs of all the different things on the SLS, if it ever flies. Anyway, we'll find out shortly. So quick roundup of Australian space news. What? So Equatorial Launch completed their 3 rocket firings up in Northern Territory. The third one being the 11th of July. And they're all nighttime launches, so it wasn't the best for TV coverage or live stream coverage, but it was good. They got it done. NASA seemed very happy. I think they recovered all of the vehicles, and everyone seemed to be quite happy with the organisation, apart from the weather. But you know, what do you do about that? So Michael Jones, the executive chairman, who keeps on calling, saying we're making great advances in astrology. I actually wrote an email to Equatorial Launch saying it's astronomy. Anyway, hope he's not watching. So yeah, so once again, the missions have been a great chance to work with NASA and work on the team and the facilities up there. So give them a good bit of confidence. Sabre Astronautics, people may not be aware of that company. They've been around quite a while. They do a lot of orbital tracking and debris tracking and stuff like that, software solutions, etc. Been very successful. They've been in operation for quite a while. They've got operations in the States and also here. They've signed a deal with Axiom Space to create an Australian presence on the ISS and a future Axiom station. So, and it's also going to develop its first formal program to enable Australians and Australian industry to access the station's orbiting microgravity laboratory. So they're aiming for direct industrial involvement, people selected from the Australian public, opening the benefits of broader industry by conventional industry. So they're going to have a competitive selection. Sabre aren't funding it. You've got to come with your own funding model and independent ability to fund the project and make it fly, but they will facilitate that via the Axiom partnership. So Axiom have had a fair bit of success. They actually launched the first private human spaceflight up to the ISS back in April 2020. So these guys were, well, one is a former professional astronaut, the rest of them are rich white guys, essentially. But they had a good mission. Next one, so move along. All right, so the deal with Axiom builds on the Sabre Astronautics growing leadership in space operations. So Sabre currently owns and operates a responsive space operations center in Adelaide and also one in Colorado in partnership with the US Space Air Force or Space Force. I don't know which they're with. So their Adelaide facility received a $6 million funding from the Space Infrastructure Fund last year. Now, they've also launched this thing where they operate potential of having not only flying an experiment to the ISS, but actually flying an Australian astronaut to run it as part of this. So that's an option that's available. So I've written off my proposal already, but anyway. Okay, so moving along, SpaceX. So the Capstone launch, so that's already gone up. I'm not sure. It's had a 3-month mission up to the moon. So using the Capstone, using the Rocket Lab, that took off on June the 28th, and it had their what do they call it? Their third stage that put it into the the Photon stage. They developed the Rocket Lab developed this Photon rocket stage. So it's not a very direct path. I mean, you wouldn't want to be sitting there in this spacecraft for it's about 3 months, but it's an indirect path, but it's very fuel efficient. So so it's on its way. It's next. What do we got? Performed several maneuvers, 4-month-long journey to the lunar orbit. So late July is the next targeted maneuver. So this is the orbital path. So you can see it's looping out, boosting itself on each orbit around the Earth as it finally gets to a situation where it's within the lunar gravity well, and then able to maneuver itself into I think they call it a retrograde orbit. Yeah. Boosters. Well, the Capstone of the what was it? Photon. Regular rocket engine. I think it's their version of their Rutherford engines, but it's obviously got deep space capabilities. But I think it's I'm not sure. No, I don't think it's a plasma drive now.
Photon is a rocket stage, but it's got spacecraft status because it has electronics on board.
Right. Yeah. So it's still attached to it. It'll stay attached until it gets into proper lunar orbit. My understanding is.
Yeah, and then it released from the Photon.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what it will look like once it's on orbit around the moon. Parabolic flight testing for space research arrives in Australia. So Being Systems is bringing parabolic flight opportunities to Australia, give daring individuals an opportunity to fly in weightlessness and also to be able to experiment. So it's a Melbourne-based group. They're flying a Marchetti S221 jet, which is an Italian-built jet. And this is it doing its zero-G testing with its little icon there. So it's already run several flights, and it's got Einstein, the zero-G llama that it uses to fly around with. So I think it had two more aircraft to their current fleet. So they must see an opportunity there to be able to fly experiments for organisations and individuals and universities, I expect. So good on them. Next birthday, maybe we'll do that. Rocket Lab launches US spy satellite into orbit. So for the Rocket Lab's done a fair bit for the National Reconnaissance Office, and it took off on the 13th of July, and it's a payloads in partnership with the Australian Defence Force as well. Has it got another one scheduled for the 23rd? What day are we on today? Oh, it must have already gone, or might have already gone. Anyway, so the NRL 162 and the 199 missions are the latest examples of NRO's commitment. So this is the architecture of the Rocket Lab vehicle and electron rocket there. Australia's first astronaut, Phil Chapman, is finally going to get to go to space. He's he died last year, about 12 months ago, actually, almost to the day. April, I think, last year he died. So he was the first Australian born. He became a US citizen, but he was born in Australia, in Melbourne, in 1935, and following a diverse career which took him to the Antarctic and the MIT Experimental Astronomy Lab. He became selected as an astronaut and worked on as a mission scientist for Apollo 14. And he never got a chance to fly in space. Apparently he's going to be, well, he's one of the scientist astronauts that joined, and back then it was all fighter jocks, and scientist astronauts were looked down upon by the rest of the group. And in fact, Harrison Smith was the actual only scientist astronaut that actually got to fly the Apollo lunar missions anyway. A few got to fly in Skylab and obviously later on the shuttle. But his extended Skylab mission was cancelled, and so he basically was hoping he's going to fly on that, but he never got the opportunity. So he's going to go up on this celestial space flight on November 30, which is a suborbital flight, but he's also going to be going later on, well, not him, but a few of his ashes going on a deep space flight, which will actually go out deep space past the orbit of the moon and even past the James Webb Space Telescope. So he's kind of got there in the end. All right, some global space news. Dmitry Rogozin has been removed as head of Roscosmos as the CPAR agreement is signed with NASA. So the head of Roscosmos on July 15, he got the bulletin, but at the same day they got this partnership agreement with the Russians to fly exchange seats to the ISS, a no-cost seat-for-seat exchange. So whether or not there was a bit of a, we're not signing this to get rid of that knucklehead type arrangement, I don't know. So he dismissed him. They gave no reason at that stage. Although Rogozin's had quite a bumpy road as head of Roscosmos. This is a few later developments. Back in July 7, NASA took the extreme rare step of criticising Roscosmos after the International Space Station using it for propaganda purposes where they had some stuff on one of their rockets and also stuff talking about the war in Ukraine and really not using the ISS as it's supposed to. So NASA criticised them for that. July 11, Aviation Explorer reported that Rogozin refused to take a call from Bill Nelson, the NASA administrator. And then Rogozin mocked US President on his Telegram channel after NASA revealed first photograph from the James Webb Space Telescope in a ceremony from the White House, and said that Biden needed a big magnifying glass and went to the bathroom for a long time. July 12, the European Space Agency said it is officially terminating work with Russia on the ExoMars probe to land on Mars. And Rogozin responded that the ESA chief was an irresponsible bureaucrat. In a tit-for-tat, Rogozin threatened to halt Russian cooperation on the use of a new European robotic arm on the space station. So that was developed for ESA by the number of European countries and launched on the Russian segment. I don't know how you could stop them using it. Rogozin's comment raised questions about whether the spacewalk scheduled last week was actually going to go ahead. It actually did. So this is a nice sort of quote from 2014. So Rogozin's behaviour seems to be getting worse, and recent actions by Rogozin suggest that he is increasingly unhinged, isolated, and desperate for some combination thereof. All right, so now they've signed this agreement, so there will be a seat exchange, no-cost seat exchange, which clears the way for two US astronauts to fly up alongside a couple of Russian cosmonauts. China launched its second space module, Wentian, just on the weekend. The 32-ton Wentian, or Quest for Heaven, launched on their Long March 5B. And it's well, I think actually rendezvous yesterday, I think, with the station. So got a quick little video here of the launch. Just goes for a couple of minutes. Over there, we are. I've edited it down a bit.
With also lots of water cooling down. So this is the final countdown.
6、5、4、3、
2, 1.
点火。
So there's a time difference between ignition and ignition itself.
140 2分32秒负5拐毫秒。140 2分32秒负5拐毫秒。
So people on the beach can see it.
Yeah, that's very visible from 8 kilometers away.
8 kilometers.
程序转弯。
So you can see how large the rocket is. Yeah, even from 8 kilometers
文
away.
昌光学
So
雷
you
达
see
工
the
作正常，
sound.
摇炮信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
We just had the announcement there that everything is as expected and
110跟踪正常。
so when can we expect the booster to start dropping off to be jettisoned?
Well, there's a couple of minutes into
now.
it before.
317
We're
跟
looking
踪正
at
常
this。is the view from the camera that's on
文
the
昌光学雷达跟
rocket.
踪正常，摇炮信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
So this is the camera that is facing down. You can even
See
see
the Earth from there.
the
that's
whole
right.
island of Hainan.
阵地112跟踪正常。
So this is the optical tracking
315
system that
跟
is
踪正常。
monitoring the launch vehicle itself. At the maybe the first minute they can still see it.
And from what we're hearing, everything is as planned,
It's nominal.
going well.
文昌光学雷达跟踪正常。
You know
摇炮
the
信号正
the
常
crowd that they
文昌
on the
飞行
beach.
正
There's
常
a hotel called Luneng Hotel. Every time there's a launch, it's fully booked.
I imagine so.
In the hotel rooms, you can see the same view on the facing the south side.
Yeah, I mean, it must be an entirely different experience, seeing it on TV like this, but being there and actually
there. In your-
feeling the launch.
In
right?
your room, holding
Yeah.
a champagne.
Yeah, not just seeing, but also feeling it happen.
Yes, the vibration and the acoustic feeling.
317跟踪正常。
We're hearing more. These are different stations checking
So
in, and
on the left side
into
is
the
the
trajectory.
optical, on the right side is the simulation. So that we can see very soon the separation of the boosters.
and if you're just tuning in, we're watching the launch of China's Wentian Space Lab, and that's headed for China's space station.
So the
We'll be
camera is,
docking in a few hours,
七
right?
杀313跟踪正常。
but the fast docking is 6 hours.
6 hours.
6 hours is for the fast docking for the astronauts, but this Wentian maybe takes longer.
Okay.
助推器关机，助推器
There's a
分离。
separation of the
Separation.
booster.
That's right. So as the boosters dropping off,
阵地112跟
So
踪
you
正
can see
常。
the 4 boosters.
and these would just most in all likelihood just drop into the sea.
Yeah, they're in the Pacific. Yes.
文昌飞
And
行
what will
正常
happen to them? Will they get them recollected and
No, normally we just abandon them. This we call it expendable launch vehicle. So
just abandoned but
They're
left
abandoned.
to float in, which is wherever the
it
waves
could go
might take them?
drop to the ocean bed, and also maybe good for the coral.
And I guess that's
Yeah.
why it's so important that this propellant that it uses is clean, right?
Yeah.
Right. So there's no worry for the sea pollution.
That's right, yeah.
抛整流罩。
And that's the
That's the fairing.
Very.
So now the Wentian is exposed to space environment. So the altitude is more than 110 kilometers. So there's no atmosphere at this moment. So the core engine will continue to push the Wentian towards the. I think there are many functionalities on board the missions. The design concept is always what we call a redundancy. You have an emergency in Tianhe, you can move the astronauts to Wentian for life support, for maneuverabilities, and for escape purpose. But fingers crossed, we have a good connections and good functioning station. So those system would be, we'll call it a redundancy system or backup system instead of just in emergency cases.
舱电分离。
So this
Right,
is
that's
separation of the
First stage.
yes.
You can really hear the applause there. I mean, that is a pretty monumental moment, right, for the rocket launch.
You can see once the separation is conducted, there's a little bit tumbling of the spacecraft. So we have to use some of what we call it attitude control engines to make sure that it has a right attitude and position before it's rendezvous and docking. So this is what we call a successful launch itself. The separation of the launch vehicle with the spacecraft means the launch vehicle has completed its job.
All right, so as I've mentioned, I think it now has docked with the rest of the station. So it's getting bigger and bigger and becoming quite a presence up there. I'm not sure, is it visible over Melbourne? I don't know whether it's that right. Do you know what the latitude is? Is it visible over Melbourne at all? Do you know?
The upper direction of the ocean.
Yeah.
It's 50-something degrees.
Right.
It's passing over Melbourne easily.
So they've well, this they'll be using the mechanical arm to help to dock it. So they had 3 separate 3-person crews visit the station, and the last one on Shenzhou 14 arrived on the 5th of June. So they've got another segment scheduled for launch in October. So they're really cranking on with it, and they will later complete a planned T-shape. Could later expand to 6 modules. So, wow. Boeing Starliner, I haven't heard a whole lot about that since it had its unmanned test flight back 9 weeks ago, but it appears to have passed everything quite well. And so there's been no showstoppers identified. So they're saying it could actually make its crewed flight this December, although no hard date's been nominated at this point. So it'll call the crew test flight. Probably going to carry 2 astronauts at this stage. And once again, if it is successful, it could clear the way to long duration operational missions to the station in 2023. So that will add then to the SpaceX Crew Dragon capability. At this stage, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams have been nominated as a prime crew. They said a short duration mission with the 2 astronauts is sufficient to meet all the objectives. However, they might go ahead and expand that, add more astronauts and make it longer. So revised schedule last week, they indicated that a launch of December 8th with a subsequent docking between 9th and the 14th. So we'll see what happens there. The Artemis update, they seem to be going quite well with their preparations. In the vehicle itself is back in the vehicle assembly building. They've been working on the hydrogen leak that was identified out at the pad. So it's a loose fitting item inside the rocket section called a collet. There you go, collet and everything. So a fist-sized ring that guides a quick disconnect during assembly operations. So they're going to repair that, or they have repaired that, and replacing seals, etc., etc. So hopefully that works out, and they're looking at late August for that launch. I think they nominated the other day 29th of August, which I think is about 10:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the 29th of August. So they've got a bit of work, batteries, etc., to put in, and other flight termination systems before they roll it back out, etc. So this is okay. So this is a slight difference. The human landing system is how you're going to get down to the moon. So obviously, I think we've probably heard that SpaceX has been awarded an initial contract for the first landing, with other partners being invited in for the second stage and what they're calling a sustainable landing system. Bit of skepticism about the whole thing, and particularly about this. I've shown this before, but the SpaceX Starship, if they landed at the same angle as Apollo 15 landed on the moon, which was 11 degrees, it looks something like this. So I'm not sure how well that's going to work out. But anyway, they might be able to do some legs, and I don't know. Who knows? A lot of people are skeptical about this whole Starship on the moon thing. Anyway, once again, here's the mission availability dates according to NASA, going right up to June of 2023. And those blue boxes there are what they're saying for this targeted first opportunity, 29th of August. And once again, we've probably seen it before. This is the Artemis 1 mission profile. It's going to be about a 2-week, well, depending on the mission date that they take off, they can achieve their objectives in longer or shorter missions, depending on which one. Bit of a side step. We don't like to do too much history, but this month is a significant year in history. It was 60 years ago in July that NASA announced their decision to adopt the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous landing architecture for the Apollo missions. So NASA needed to select a technique to reach the moon within a given time frame, and they considered 3 options. The first being the direct ascent from the Earth, just point a rocket up, big rocket, just fire to the moon, land, do your stuff, fire your engine, come back and land. However, to land such a mass on the moon required a gargantuan rocket called the Nova, thrust of about 12 million pounds. And that was a big ask. Probably still is a big ask. And then there would be a lander, something like this, which would land, they'd do their walk, and then they'd blast the whole thing back off again. The second option was the Earth Orbit Rendezvous. Once again, it involved a large spacecraft into Earth orbit before just sending it to the moon. But it would rendezvous in orbit before doing that. So there'd be less difficulty. You'd probably send 2 Saturn V type vehicles into Earth orbit, have them dock together and do their thing, and then shoot off to the moon with a big heavy lander, similar to the direct ascent option, landing on the moon. Von Braun was initially very keen on that. 2 of his Saturn Vs would go up there and they carry the spacecraft. They would then rendezvous, etc., etc. A third option was a lunar orbit rendezvous, which is a smaller lunar lander that would rendezvous with the main craft in lunar orbit before going to the Earth, going back to the Earth. Each option had advantages and disadvantages. The Space Task Group back then initially favoured the Earth orbit rendezvous, which von Braun did. I think it was the lunar orbit rendezvous was too risky. However, July 11 in '62, they announced that they were going with Earth orbit rendezvous, sorry, lunar orbit rendezvous. I love this brochure. It's about a 4-page PDF file online. You can have a look. It's pretty cool from the date. Although this is a bit of a common misconception, although he didn't conceive of the lunar orbit rendezvous idea, John C. Hobart, an aeronautical engineer from Langley, championed that option at every opportunity, despite meeting initial resistance. He was frustrated. In November, he wrote directly to Robert Siemens, bypassing his management to explain the advantages. Siemens saw the merit, and then von Braun came around to the whole idea, which in the end result, they then adopted the lunar rendezvous. And then during that press conference, James Webb announced that they were going to go with that, being it's the most desirable from the standpoints of time, cost, and mission accomplishments. And 7 years and 5 days later from that announcement, they lifted off on their Apollo 11 mission to the moon. 7 years and 5 days for making that decision. The amount of progress back in the 60s to go from that, idea to hardware blasting off the pebs, phenomenal. Apollo 1 was in there as well, dead right, in '67. All right, so headline story this month, James Webb. I've just got a couple of intro slides here, and I'll hand over to Andrew Rennie, the expert. So the James Webb Telescope basically sent back its first images, and pretty damn spectacular. So I'm not going to go through all these because I've only got 3 or 4 slides anyway, but I thought I'd just leave you with this slide and hand to Andrew. The big difference between the Hubble and the James Webb is the wavelengths in which it operates. So Hubble basically works in the visible light spectrum and James Webb in the infrared. So with that, it's enough for me. I'll hand over to Andrew. We're just going to change presentations. Just stand by. I'll turn the microphone on.
All right, greetings, everyone. I'm going to present on the Hubble, sorry, yeah, well, there's a bit of Hubble in this, but on James Webb Space Telescope, and also, if I get time, on Gaia. And I'm going to start with Gaia. The diagram on the orbit on the screen here. Now, yes, the cursor is showing good. This is the James Webb Space Telescope orbit. It's a Lissajous orbit. And here is the Gaia orbit around L2.
What's Gaia?
Now, L2 is Lagrange point where the gravity and the centripetal forces are balanced.
What's Gaia?
Oh, I'm coming to that. Okay. I was going to start with a movie, but I wasn't confident that if I did that, it would then default into this software here. So let's go back to the movie and we'll introduce what Gaia is.
Since 24th of January, 2022, the James Webb Space Telescope is in a halo orbit around the Lagrange point L2 about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. In the same region of space, the Gaia satellite has performed astrometric measurements since July 2014, orbiting L2 in a Lissajous orbit. On Friday the 18th of February, at 8:53 and 10:38 CET, the Webb Observatory has been seen through Gaia's telescopes for the first time. Due to Gaia's continuous scanning of the sky, this will happen again in the future, several dozen times over the next few years. Letting the movie's camera move around the spacecraft's orbits gives a three-dimensional impression. The lines and loops in the background are the orbits of planets. The body oscillating back and forth is the Earth's moon on its 27 days orbit.
So Gaia is an astrometry satellite. It measures the positions of stars extremely accurately. And if I get time at the end of this presentation, I'll show you some of the data release 3, which was done a few weeks ago for that. So here we have the orbits, and this between 400,000 and 1 million kilometers apart, depending on where they are in their orbits. Now, the people who are controlling Gaia, as you saw in that video, managed to take some images of Gaia. And it's shown, of James Webb Space Telescope over here. And here are some enlargements of those images. Based on that, the people controlling Gaia were able to tell the James Webb people, you are 40 meters away from where you think you are. That's how accurate the Gaia satellite is in its astrometry. Okay, now, getting the Hubble, getting the James, I'll keep saying Hubble, getting the James Webb aligned. This is an animation of the process. I'm going to go step by step what they did with that. So that's the process of image stacking. Now, let's move on. So here's the initial alignment mosaic. And the first thing they had to do was work out which of these images of a star, they're pointing at a single star, they had to work out which one was which. And by gently wiggling the mirrors, they were able to work out what they were. Then the next stage was to bring them into this hexagonal alignment. Notice that now they are diffraction limited. I'm going to talk about these diffraction spikes later in this talk. And they identified which mirrors belong, which of these diffraction spikes belong to which mirror. And then they were able to bring them in, as you saw in that video, to a single point. Now, James Webb does not have any cameras to photograph itself, but it does have this engineering camera that when you remove the lenses and so on, can actually image the picture of the mirrors in the secondary mirror. This one is bright because it happens to be pointing at that guide star. The others are slightly off. So this is before they did the perfect alignment, this so-called selfie. And that's when they finally had it all aligned. Now do notice the struts that are holding the secondary mirror are shown here. And that's going to come up in my narrative shortly. Notice the angle at which they're placed. And here we have the evaluation image that was done. And you can see in it, this is taken with the NIRCam, near infrared camera. And you've got the star here. You've got these diffraction spikes, and all these other things here are galaxies in the distance. Now it was aimed, this exposure was done to do the star, to check the alignment, and wasn't done to image these galaxies, but that's just a bonus. That's how sensitive this mirror is, the telescope is. Oops, so, no, we went there. Now, explaining the spikes. There's a segmented mirrors, and we get spikes coming off not only the struts, but also off the mirror elements as well, the gaps between the mirrors. When it is a sharp edge, you get diffraction. Now you can actually see this yourself. If you put your fingers very close together and look at a light, and you'll see a series of bright and dark bands. You can do it right now if you want. Series of bright and dark bands between your fingers as they get almost touching each other. And those are diffraction spikes as the light is diffracting through the gap between your fingers. All right, back to the picture here. So we have spikes due to the mirror support. We also have spikes due to the hexagonal shape of the mirrors. And when we put it together, we get this sort of image here. All right, so let's move on. Now I'm going, don't try to read that there on the right-hand side because I'm going to zoom in on that now. So what I've done is I've taken this graphic from the Space Telescope Institute and I have enlarged. So we've got, these are the elements. We've got the primary mirror segments. We've got the struts, secondary mirror. And on the Hubble, the struts are at right angles to each other. And so we get this star-like pattern. But on the Webb, because we've got these struts at different angles, we get this pattern instead. That's due to the struts. In addition, the primary mirror, the shape of that affects the diffraction pattern. And if you've got a circular mirror, then you get these diffractions. If you've got a square mirror, you'll get diffraction like that one. And the hexagonal mirror, which is what Webb has, gives you this star-like pattern. All right. As I said, the strut, if you've got single strut, you get the diffraction, by the way, is at right angles to the strut. So the strut's up and down, as in this diagram here, the diffraction pattern goes horizontal. When you've got a cross like that one, then you get that. And that's what Hubble has. And the James Webb, because the struts are at those angles, you get these diffraction patterns there. Yeah, so if you're looking at a Hubble picture or a James Webb picture and you want to know which is which, look for the star pattern. If it's like this one, it's a Hubble picture. But if it's like this, it's a James Webb picture. All right, move on. So that's summarizing then how this pattern gets. So you're going to get this when you don't get it on the faint galaxies because the diffractions are there, but they're smeared out because it's not a point source. And so you don't notice it so much. Right, move on. Now, here are the instruments on board. NIRSPEC, the near infrared spectrometer, or spectrometer, as some people say. NIRCam, the near infrared camera. The mid-infrared interferometer. And NIRIS is the near infrared imaging spectrometer. And there's also a fine guidance sensor, which they use to figure out where they're pointing. All right, so those are the instruments. The frequency range, or the wavelength range, NIRSPEC goes from the red in the visible right through to the beginning of the mid-infrared. NIRIS, much the same as it does NIRCam, but MIRI is the odd one out because it's in the mid-infrared, hence the name MIRI, mid-infrared instrument. So that's what you've got to remember. You're looking at the infrared when you're looking at Webb pictures. Unlike the Hubble, which goes through from slightly in the ultraviolet to a little way into the infrared. All right, let's move on. So here's looking at a comparison between the MIRI image at 7.7 micrometers over here, compared with the same field. You'll notice these same stars are over here. And these are the Spitzer infrared camera at 8 microns. So you can see we've got a vast improvement over what we had with Spitzer, which was NASA's great big infrared telescope. We actually only had a 0.8 meter mirror. Right. Now, comparing the wavelengths with the Webb, what Webb sees is a very sharp spike at a sensitive point, whereas Spitzer is more smeared out. So you can see Webb is much more sensitive. Now, this is again, this is the fine guidance sensor picture. And so I've got pages and pages of notes, which I'm not going to read all to you, but I do need to remind myself occasionally what we're looking at. So this is with a fine, yes, it is a fine guidance sensor, otherwise known as FGS, and this was developed by the Canadian Space Agency. Notice that even when a star is out of the frame, it still gives you diffraction spikes. Notice the galaxies, which are these faint blobs all over the place, don't give you the diffraction spikes. As I said, not because they're not there, it's just because they're smeared out and confused with the rest of the thing. Now, this picture was done with 72 exposure, taken over 32 hours. The 72 exposures over 37 hours. And that bright star there, by the way, is magnitude 9.3. For those who know what astronomical magnitudes are. Okay, now this is taken with the mid-infrared spectrometer, and you can see the wavelengths that it's measuring at, indicated here. And it provides us three-dimensional data cubes in which every pixel in an image contains a unique spectrum. So every pixel in these pictures has a spectrum. So you can say you can pick that pixel there, and you can find the same pixel there, and spread it onto a data cube and get us. So this is actually the bright star HD 37122, which is located in the southern sky near the Large Magellanic Cloud. Now, each panel, the cyan circle in each of these pictures shows you a 1 arc-second radius region expected around the star. Now, 1 arc-second. You're probably familiar with full circle being 360 degrees. If you take 1/60th of 1 degree, you've got an arc minute. And if you take 1/60th of an arc minute, you've got an arc second. And so these are 1 arc second radius from where the star should be. You can get an idea how accurate this thing is. It's amazing. All right, now this one, let's see if, yes, the zoom works. Okay, what we're looking at here is a nearest image. And it can see over 2,000 infrared colors. And to test the detector image, they operated it as a single object slitless spectrometer. And each color seen in the image corresponds to a specific infrared wavelength of between 0.6 and 2.8 micrometers. This is infrared. So I know it goes green to blue, or red through green, but these are infrared colors. Now, if we zoom in and move that up and across, you see these lines here? These are the spectral lines. And from that, you can work out what elements are there and also whether they're redshifted or not. Now look at that. Isn't that amazing detail? You can see why everyone's raving over this telescope. The spectral lines are more obvious in some parts of the spectrum than others. All right. Now, let's move on to this. What on earth are we looking at here, you might say? Well, you probably don't remember, but when they started to do spectroscopic examinations of stars at the Siding Spring Observatory, at the Anglo-Australian, as it was called there, it's now called the Australian Astronomical Observatory, they were looking at one star, pointing at it and for ages getting the spectrum, then looking at another star, yeah, okay, and another one, and they'd only do a few stars a night. Then they got the brilliant idea, hey, why don't we put on these little fiber optic things and point at a whole lot of stars at once. So they had this plate and they could look at a whole lot of stars at once. Well, guess what James Webb can do? It can look at hundreds of stars at once. And these are the spectra. Let's zoom in and you can see the spectra of, not sure, there's more than 200 spectra in this one, of 200 different stars. So, So I reckon that's pretty amazing.
Also take spectra of what doesn't look like stuff.
Sorry?
They also take spectra of the areas that don't look like stuff.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is the near spec instrument. This little video here shows how it works. Light comes in at the bottom. And if you count how many reflections are done here, it is just mind-blowing. And each of these little mirrors has to be lined exactly. Otherwise, it don't work. Now we get the spectrum. So there's micro shutter arrays in there. And if I've got it right, you wouldn't want to drop it, would you?
Well, we can.
Okay. Now, this one I go to about 2 minutes, and you'll see these shutters in operation.
Go one lower. Let's go lower and then go higher and higher each time.
Okay.
So you're focusing on the screen, right?
Yeah.
Now that's one shutter there. This is one shutter. You'll see it open in a moment. There's a whole lot of them there now. And each of these can be commanded separately so that they point at a particular star in the star field.
There's actually a little door.
They're little shutters that open and shut, and either let the light in or block it. Then it goes through a grating and gets separated into the spectrum. All right. Now, this is what they do with the data. They've got the spectrum. And they build a data cube, what's called a data cube. Notice that term SPACSL. All right. Now, on to our next major topic, which is the history of the universe. And so we've been looking at the engineering so far. Now we're into the actual data release. Now, this is from the Big Bang through to today. And Hubble is going to be looking back to almost the Dark Ages, not quite, just sort of about here somewhere. Okay, let's go on. These are the first release targets and where they are in the sky against the Milky Way. All right. This is Hubble's view of SMACS 0723-73. And once again, it's possible to zoom in and see what's there and move on to another view. I think I went on 104, 105, yes. And another Hubble view. So that's what we already knew about SMACS 0723-73 before Webb. Those are the Hubble pictures. Again, this is a Hubble Deep Field image, and you don't have to enlarge very much before you run into a big blur. Now, this is the Webb. You can tell, of course, from the shape of the spikes. And you can try counting. You know, the Hubble Deep Field, I actually made a thing where the kids, students at school, could click on a particular galaxy and get the spectrum and work out how far away it was, you know, how much redshifted it was. And there were thousands of galaxies in that the first Hubble Deep Field. Took quite a bit of work to get it all to work. Anyway, we now see there, and we can zoom in quite a bit on this, and I've got other zooms that I've done. Galaxy, there's an edge on galaxy there. And there's lots of gravitational lensing. I'll show you that more in a moment. So let's go on. Alongside it, from another camera on board the thing, was NIRCam. And so we've got the comparison of the thing. You'll notice you see different things depending on which wavelengths you're looking at. Again, an advantage of having different cameras at different wavelengths. You see different things. You can tell which filters, some of the public release graphics they release show you the filters that are being used. These numbers are in micrometers, and you're using the Murray and NIRCam filters in these particular images. Those are the ones that we used. So keep an eye on those if you see them there. Those are the wavelengths in microns, as some people call micrometers. So here we go with a Murray mid-infrared image. By picking out different galaxies, let's look at this one here, for example. So way in the distance. They can work out it's 12.6 billion years old from, well, say it's 12.6 billion light years away from us. And this is the spectrum from that. And by looking at the spectrum, you can work out how far it is by working out how much redshifted it has been. So they can just pick out any galaxy here and they've got the spectra for it, just from that one image. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The days when you had to stare at something for hours and hours before you got any data, is gone. Now it's just very quickly done. All right. So here they can work out, say from this one, which is 13 billion years away, shown here, this little tiny speck. Let's zoom in on it. There it is. From that, and it's just a blur because it's so far away, but Webb can get the spectrum from it and identify what elements are there. Just that little tiny speck. And you can imagine they're doing it for all these other, they would keep a PhD student going, oh, for the whole PhD thesis, just that one image, analyzing it. And that's just the first image. Now, I haven't done the maths myself, but Bill Nelson said, if you held a grain of sand at arm's length, that's the area of the sky covered by this first deep field image. I haven't done the maths, so I can't say he's right or wrong. Now, gravitational lensing, how does it happen? Well, we've got a foreground galaxy here. It has a certain amount of measurable mass, but it also has about 9 or 10 times more dark matter associated with it that we can't see. But dark matter, being matter, bends space. And so light travels in straight lines through bent space, so it gets bent. So here's a distant galaxy way in the distance, say 11 billion light years away, and the light comes towards this galaxy, and instead of just going off there, in that direction, it heads off in this direction. So when we look at it from here, it looks like it's over here in the sky. So the galaxy appears to be enlarged by this foreground galaxy. So that's gravitational lensing. And when they form a ring, they're called an Einstein ring. And when it forms a cross shape, it's called an Einstein cross, after Albert Einstein. Well, here we are looking at a nearest image, and we look at these two here, these two things, and say, yeah, they look like they're part of the same sort of thing. Are they though? Could they be just different galaxies? Well, put nearest on it and gives that spectrum. On this other patch over here, it gives that spectrum. Oh, they're the same. So this is the same galaxy, gravitationally lensed around this nearby galaxy. All right. Now, I've taken a few extracts because I couldn't reliably zoom in on these pictures. I've taken a few cut and pastes here at full resolution, but I can zoom. So, so that's the central galaxy, which is doing the lensing. Here are these arcs that I said. Are they the same galaxy? Yes, they are. But you can see more arcs here, and right over the whole image, there's plenty of arcs. Here's another one over here. And this one is enlarged so much you can even see it's a sort of a galaxy shape, but spread right around there. So this is part of an Einstein ring. Look at these other ones here. There's a whole lot smeared out by that nearby galaxy. And looking in there, we can see all sorts of galaxies. The traditional spiral galaxy. This one's a crazy shape. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. And of course, we got stars as well in our own galaxy. Okay. And looking at a fairly blank area of that image, we still get galaxies, 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 galaxy, galaxy. There's a lot of work there. And I compared here the 121 is, sorry. That's a lens galaxy, but I'm just trying to see the cameras that we used here. Yeah, NearCam and MIRI. So what I've done is I've cut from one picture and cut from another and put them together. So you can see, compare what the two different cameras show you. All right, so let's move on. Now, to the Carina Nebula. Now, this is a ground-based telescope picture by Shlomi Lipinski. And it is a pretty phenomenal sort of, it's a vast, vast galaxy. Nebulosity is not it's in our own galaxy, sorry. We've come a lot closer now. So, and look at the complex structure in that. And this is only just a tiny part of it. So let's move on to another one. I always think this looks like a bird when I see that. And my familiarity with that goes way back to looking at the Palomar 1950s photos, and that was evident there. But again, detail. So it's in the southern sky, and this was a composite of several exposures taken in February of 2000 with the Curtis Schmidt Telescope and Cerro Talo Inter-American Observatory in Chile. Now, combining the ground-based photograph with Hubble, and finally Hubble zooming in on the different parts. Now, so this is what we're talking about when we look at the James Webb Carina photo. Once again, this is the ground-based, sorry, this is a Hubble photo showing these nebulosities. And I won't interpret the colors for you, but look at this. This is 2 light years across, just that arc that there. This tells you the oxygen is blue and the reddish brown is hydrogen alpha light. Right. Another Hubble picture, another part of the nebula. And another part. Way back in my younger days, I used to be very peripherally involved in a program that monitored Eta Carina. Now, Eta Carina is a star which exploded, well, last big explosion was in the 1800s. And we were watching this because we know sometimes it's going to go supernova. Now, this is a nova explosion, not a supernova explosion here. And this is a Hubble picture. And we were watching that and monitoring the brightness of this compared to the brightness of some neighboring stars and looking to see, getting the light curve and saying, okay, maybe we'll get a warning when it goes supernova, because when it goes supernova, you'll be able to see it in the daylight sky. It's going to be that bright. So yeah, we'd like some forewarning when it's going to happen so we can tell everyone, hey, go outside and have a look. Get your telescopes pointed at it. Anyway, it's going to be bright when it goes off. Anyway, I was a bit disappointed. That the only supernova I've seen in my lifetime is 1987A, which is another one. Anyway, there's light echoes visible in the Hubble pictures at different dates. As from the explosion, light's traveling out at the speed of light, but then reflecting off material and coming to us. So that's the sort of context in which another Hubble picture here, in which we are looking at the Carina Nebula, this picture, 10 light years across. And that just that bar here. It's a huge nebula. Now, this is, can you tell me, this is Hubble or Webb? You haven't been listening, Peter. Look. What do you reckon? Hubble, right. So this is a Hubble, and see that star there? Keep your eye on that star there. Okay. And this bay and this headland, which I'm going to talk about later. Okay. That's where they pointed the Webb. And there it is. Now, the star I talked about is there. There's the bay and there's the head. And look at the incredible detail we now get. So what's happening here? There is a, just out of the picture, there is a very bright, hot, ultraviolet emitting star. And the ultraviolet light is striking the gas and dust here and evaporating it. And you can see some of this evaporation going on. And that is wearing away at this material and exposing the newborn stars that are born in that cloud. Now you can see that process going on back here, where again, you can see that this dust cloud here is being eroded away by the ultraviolet light from new stars. All right, now, again, you can see what NIRCam filters we used to make this image. This is 2 light years across here, just that bar there. So you add that across the picture and you've got, it's big. This space is big, man. Space is big. Okay, now this is a, well, the Miri, I think, image. And again, because it's different wavelengths, it shows different features. And now you can see more through the clouds than you could in the other one. Now, what's going on here? This is actually the Orion Nebula, but the process is the same. We've got a ultraviolet light coming in and striking this material, dissociating the material, ionizing it, and then the ionized gas floats away. So that's the process that's going on, revealing inside the stars. Now, with ordinary optical, you don't see the stars inside it, but with an infrared image, you see through the dust. So this is the NIRCam and Miri combined image. Now, are you familiar with a phenomenon? And I need to look up the pronunciation of this. Way past my notes. All right, here we go. It's pareidolia. Pareidolia. Are you familiar with that term? It means seeing faces and things when they're not there. You look at the clouds and you say, oh yeah, that looks like a man, or that's a woman, or that's a bird. You know that effect? Now you know what it is. So I have looked at this picture and I said, okay, what can I see there? Well, can you see a big monster there, the head of a monster? And can you see a bird, a wedge-tailed eagle, There's its eye, there's its beak, and there's its wings. And in this one, you're looking up the nose. Its chin, nose. And in the dark, you know, the Aborigines, when they look at the Southern Cross, can see an emu because you look at the dark area rather than where the stars are. So here I can see a dark creature here. And this is a shoot come out of the ground, and it's still leaning over, and it's going to flip up and open up to sprout. That's not all human things. And what can you see there? I can see a woman lying on her back. Here's the head, breasts, and down to the legs. All right. Now, Stephan's quintet. We are, keep moving along. Stephan, this is a ground-based photograph taken from European Southern Observatory using FITS software. FITS Liberator software is available online. I've got a copy of it, but I've never quite worked out how to use it. But using that, you can take these FIT data cubes and you can get pictures out of them. And that's done by a guy called John Corbin. Now, this is the Hickson group, or Stephan's quintet. And if you look at the speed at which these things are going, you notice that one, and this one are pretty much the same. But this one is only 791, 800 kilometers per second. Something's different. Well, this one is actually very much closer to us than these other ones. So although it's called a quintet, it's not really a quintet in the sense of this picture. It just looks like this. There's 5 galaxies there. So anyway, let's move on to this one is also a ground-based picture. But over here, it turns out this one is also about the same distance as the other ones. So it can be regarded as being part of the set. This is from the Hubble, looking at one of those central parts of the galaxy. And again, from Hubble, notice that even in Hubble, you can see individual stars. Well, it looks like there might be individual stars, as well as lots of star-forming hydrogen-rich areas. All right. Now, this one is the James Webb picture. It's one of the big reveals. Again, I could zoom in and out here all day, but I've actually picked out a few interesting parts later on. So let's move on. You've all seen that anyway now. Different image. Let's go back and compare. See what you see the difference. Why is that? Because they're taken with different filters, different instrument. This one shows the gas quite nicely. And once again, down the bottom, take a look at the filters that are being used in NIRCam and MIRI. Look at the enormous size, 100,000 light years on that, just that scale bar there. Now, this is the MIRI image, I think. 312. Yeah, that's the mirror image. Once again, see how the mirror shows up the dust and gas clouds very much more clearly than the other instrument. Notice the mirror image, sorry, the filters being used here, just 3 filters. Once again, we can zoom in on a particular interesting thing, and it turns out that this one over here has a black hole, an active black hole, and there's gas coming out of it. And so we look at this part here, and we find the spectrum, and we can identify iron, argon, neon, sulfur. And over here, on this part, we can identify hydrogen, molecular hydrogen, silicates, rock, sand, and molecular hydrogen. So that's the sort of detail, and we can do that for every part of that image to see what they're made of. This is the medium resolution spectroscopy. We can also identify what gas it is. So looking at that same black hole and the gas coming out of it, you can't see the actual black hole itself, but you can see the gas coming out of the accretion zone. We can do this data cube and identify oxygen, hydrogen, iron, and atomic and molecular at different wavelengths. And that's just one spot of it. We can do that for all these other tiny spots. And we can work out how fast the gas is traveling as well. Now, some of my little cutouts, I've grabbed a few parts of these pictures. Look at how many stars you can see in that galaxy. That's the nearby galaxy as part of that. It looks like it's part of that quintet, but it's actually closer to us than the other ones. And again, you can work out, whether they're red giants or white dwarfs or normal range stars. What's a normal star? So that's yeah. And through that galaxy, you can see other galaxies. Look at this galaxy here. Look at this galaxy. Look at that galaxy. And so on. And then looking at a apparently blank area of that, away from the ones you look at and say, oh, gee, look at those galaxies. Look on the side, in the distance. This is what you see. Myriads and myriads of galaxies. You wonder whether Ober's paradox will come into play here. Now, let's go on to the Southern Ring Nebula. This is a Hubble picture. Again, processed by an amateur astronomer from the Hubble data using that FITS Liberator software. Now, Webb. And this is the mirror image. Again, the wavelengths used and the colors they're assigned to are shown down here. And this is around about 1/4 of a light year across. So the whole thing here is about 3/4 of a light year. Now take a look at that there. I'm going to come in on that shortly. Take a look at this here. I'm going to come in on that as well. What is it? Well, here is the 405 is the I keep forgetting which is Miri and which is MIDI. Okay, 405. Yes, it's a near cam. This is a near cam image. And we've got here apparently one star in the middle. And you go back and you say, but hang on, didn't it look like there were two stars there? Well, there's a reason for that. But notice these streaks and things. Once again, I've analyzed this picture by cutting out bits and pieces of it. So this is the NIRCam image. Comparing the two cameras, or instruments, I should say. Now, here is a galaxy which we're seeing through the main foreground nebula. It's a planetary nebula. Notice the colors. Now, in this one, I've taken from the other image, same galaxy, same star as we saw a moment ago. So that's the sort of detail you can zoom in on these images. Now, from this bright star over here, we've got light coming through gaps between the dust. And like you see at sunset, you see lanes of light through the clouds. Well, we're seeing this exact same effect here. All right. There's the central star. And it's interesting because there's actually two stars there. And they are orbiting each other. And one of them is a hot ultraviolet star, and that's one that exploded. And the other one is a companion, which hasn't yet exploded. Now, when I say explode, it's not a supernova explosion. It's a nova, we call it a nova explosion. So, and I could go on, I've written a whole lot of notes here, which I haven't got time to read, about these two stars and what they're doing. But let's move on. Now, exoplanet, WASP. And it's orbiting a coolish star, very close. It's a hot Jupiter. And WASP 96 is the name of the star, and 96b is the name of the planet. Now, look, this is astronomical units. This is 0.1 of an astronomical unit. The Earth's 1 astronomical unit away from the sun. And here is this WASP 96b, the exoplanet, orbiting around WASP 96 at about 0.4 astronomical units. Compared to our solar system, there's the Earth at 1 AU. This is the habitable zone. And in here is where WASP 96b is, right in close to the star, real close. It is being roasted. Well, even though it's so close to its star, Webb was able to observe a transit going across and the dip down in starlight. And this was on June the 21st. As the light from the star passes through the atmosphere of this exoplanet, certain wavelengths are scattered out and other wavelengths are absorbed. And so we get an absorption spectrum. That is where some of the colors from the star are missing when the light goes through the atmosphere. Well, from previous observations, this absorption pattern was seen. Now, if the sky had no cloud in it, the sodium light seen from this in the atmosphere of this hot planet the spectrum would look like that, and it does. If it was cloudy, you'd only see the top of that spectrum and the rest would be blank. You wouldn't see the bottom part because it wouldn't get through the clouds. So the expectation was that this would be a cloud-free planet. Very hot, but cloud-free. And that was confirmed by analyses. This shows the profile if it was clear, if it had a cloud deck, or if it was hazy. And you see the actual data matches the cloud-free scenario. So when they pointed the web at this, they said, okay, it's going to be cloud-free. But it'd be interesting to see what's in the atmosphere. We already know there's sodium. Well, this is what they got. And there's the actual data of the white dots and the error bars associated with them. And the best fit model is the blue line, which matches water in the atmosphere. Hey, water. And so the press release came out saying it was a steamy atmosphere with cloudy weather. But hang on, we just seen it, it's got no clouds. So what's going on? Well, that has yet to be resolved, but they now think that maybe they thought wrong and it should have clouds high in the atmosphere. You take your pick, okay, as to who you're going to believe. Right, now into our solar system. We're on the home run now, folks. This you recognize as a picture from Voyager in 1977, 1979, and the discovery of a ring. Now, because Voyager had a color filter wheel, and it took a picture through one filter, then another through another filter, and rotated. In between times, of course, the craft was moving. So here are the different filter images of the limb of Jupiter, and it has been adjusted so that we get the ring, which was discovered, shown up in the more or less right colors. So there we go. Voyager discovered a ring around Jupiter. You can't see it from Earth. At least you didn't used to be able to. Galileo went into orbit around Jupiter and was able to image the ring a number of times. Again, your scale bar here for 10,000 kilometers. And you've got the main ring here, but you've also got this Gossamer ring going out. And another eclipse photo from Galileo. We've got Jupiter in eclipse here. And again, we've got the ring shown here, seen almost edge on. So Jupiter has a ring. That was a big surprise when it was first discovered. Well, Webb has been pointed at Jupiter, and here's Jupiter. And over here is Europa. Now, why has it got a dark spot in the middle? And the answer is that the instrument has been overloaded by the brightness of Europa and has been sort of burned out in the image. Over here is the shadow of Europa. And here's the great red spot, which is not so great these days. And I've seen comment on I don't usually read comments on the, when I look at the, people write comments about pictures, but no one's been able to explain this. Someone said, oh, no, it's the chip that's been taken out of the mirror by the meteorite hitting it, which it isn't. And so no one can explain that, why it's there. Anyway, move on to another picture of Jupiter. And now, for different exposure, we quite clearly now see the ring. Zoom in on that. So here's the ring. And there's a tear in the fabric of space-time. That's Doctor Who and his TARDIS. And there's Europa. And on the other side, if I zoom back out again, you can see the ring as well over here. Now, again, using different instruments, we have Europa, the mysterious spot, and two of the tiny moons, Thebe and Metis. And again, the shadow of Europa on the planet Jupiter. And here, this shows up the ring quite nicely. All the way from, well, cheating by 1.5 million kilometers, but still quite a long way from Jupiter. Now, this is an asteroid. It's in the main belt, and its name, it says, trying to look up, I can't remember it. I spent too many days looking at this. Oh, it's an asteroid called Tenzing, asteroid number 6481, main belt asteroid. Now, Webb was designed to track objects in our solar system at 30 milliarc seconds per second as it moves. This asteroid was moving at 67 milliarc seconds. And they tracked a number of asteroids. I've only released one of the asteroid pictures. That's this one. I haven't seen any of the others, but they did track other ones as well. All right. Now, Gaia. Peter, wake up. Gaia. One of the surprises to me was that it's able to do helioseismology. That is, the vibrations of the stars. And then you can do sonifications like this. So it's able to pick out when stars are vibrating. That's the actual sonation taken from the Gaia data. 3 different stars and the different modes of vibration. Now, Gaia was designed to look where stars are and plot them exactly where they are. But it's able to do other things that surprised me. I obviously hadn't read closely enough the details about Gaia when it was being made.
The Gaia mission of the European Space Agency will accurately measure the space velocities of over 30 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Everything in our galaxy orbits around the center, very much like in a thin spinning disk. Stars closer to it travel on faster orbits and take less time to make one full orbit, similar to the way the planets orbit the Sun. The inner portions of the galaxy are dominated by the bulge with a central bar-shaped structure, an extended region with more stars compared to the outer regions. The Gaia team uses the new observations from space over a period of about 3 years for unraveling the kinematic structure towards the galactic center at some 26,000 light-years. The new Gaia observations reveal the velocities of stars of unprecedented quality, covering regions from the bar around the galactic center to the disk outskirts, shown with yellow, green and dark blue colors. Stars closer to the Sun are shown in red and are traveling at larger speeds. The new observations with Gaia reveal that stars in the bar have contracting and expanding motions, shown here in alternating blue and red patterns around the central regions of the galaxy. A bar angle of about 20 degrees was also measured by Gaia. The Sun travels at a circular speed of about 240 kilometers per second around the galactic center, but it will take about 220 million years to complete one orbit. Gaia's third data release publishes the star velocities besides many other properties. Gaia's precision makes it possible to map the star velocities to much greater distances than were accessible before. The astronomers now see details in the velocities of stars at levels of precision that have never been observed before.
Gaia's also been able to create this orrery. From the data, you can create this orrery showing the motions of binary stars. That's how precisely, because it can measure the central star and the other and the other star and show their motions quite nicely. And here's an illustration of how it does that. Because not only does it measure the position of the stars, it also measures whether it's coming towards us or away from us by the light, the spectrum of it, as shown in this chart at the top here. Just watch that again there. You'll notice that these, if you now look at the sorry. Now look at the spectrum, see how it's moving.
As well as stars, galaxies and quasars, Gaia also observes objects in our solar system, measuring their positions and brightnesses at different times. By far the largest group of solar system objects in Gaia's Data Release 3 are 154,741 asteroids, for which Gaia has determined the orbits. Depending on their orbits, one can distinguish different groups of asteroids. Most of the asteroids are in the main belt, between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Over a period of about 10,000 years, Jupiter's powerful gravity can perturb an asteroid's path so strongly that some of them become Mars crossers. Do you notice another group that is around the distance of Jupiter? They are the so-called Trojans. They are collected in two clusters, preceding and following the giant planet, but never getting close to it. If we move beyond the orbit of Neptune, we find trans-Neptunian objects. Gaia observed the brightest 24 members of this population. Let's now focus again on the internal regions of the solar system. Back in the inner solar system, we find objects that come close to the Earth and sometimes cross its orbit. They were brought to the inner solar system from the main belt due to gravitational perturbations by Jupiter and other planets. Due to close encounters with the terrestrial planets, the orbits of near-Earth asteroids reach large inclinations with respect to the Earth's orbit and can also come very close to the Sun, where they experience strong heating. None of the known near-Earth objects is a danger to Earth in the coming decades, but it is very important to determine their orbits precisely. We now move close to the Earth and observe this group of 446 near-Earth asteroids. Finally, we move into the main belt and see many of the 153,220 asteroids passing by.
And pretty much, this is very high resolution, and the computer's not quite coping with the data rate. And won't show all this, just a little part of it. And this is the final movie, I think.
The Gaia satellite is mainly designed to detect and measure the positions of stars. However, the Gaia mission of the European Space Agency also provides a census of other celestial sources that appear point-like in Gaia's camera. Among these objects are many asteroids in our solar system. Gaia's second catalogue, published in April 2018, has provided observational data for about 14,000 asteroids. Here we show some of their orbits. With the third data release by the Gaia mission, the astronomical community is provided with data for more than 150,000 asteroids. The release contains measurements of their positions, brightnesses, and colours. Using many such measurements, very precise asteroid orbits have been determined. And for the first time, Gaia Data Release 3 also includes spectroscopic data for asteroids, providing information about the chemical composition of their surfaces. Some examples are shown now. The asteroid Steins is approximately 5 kilometers in diameter. In September 2008, the European Space Agency's Rosetta spacecraft flew by Steins at a distance of 800 kilometers. It shows a slightly reddish colour, partly due to the mineral enstatite. By adding up dozens of spectra taken by Gaia, it was confirmed that more red light is reflected by Steins than light from shorter wavelengths. On its way to the comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko, the Rosetta space probe flew by Lutetia at a minimum distance of about 3,000 kilometers. Lutetia has a mean radius of about 50 kilometers and mainly consists of metal-enriched silicates. The reflectance spectrum taken by Gaia is much flatter than in the case of the asteroid Steins. Gaia's third data release provides more than 60,000 reflectance spectra for asteroids, about 8 times the number previously available. We use these spectra to colour the asteroids. These colours depend on the chemical composition of the asteroid surfaces. The colours here are strongly exaggerated. We now quickly leave the plane of our solar system and look at it from above. Gaia's catalogue of solar system objects contains trans-Neptunian objects, near-Earth asteroids, and also 31 moons of planets in our solar system. But most of the Gaia-observed asteroids orbit the Sun between Mars and Jupiter. Different groups of asteroids with common origins are investigated now.
Okay, we saw that part. Bepi Colombo. He's gone past Mercury for the second time. The asteroid Bennu has been analysed. The impact of the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft And you're probably aware that it penetrated quite a long way, and they've come up with an explanation as shown in this video, which I'll just run again. The moon, if you drop a 50 kilogram mass on it at a velocity of equivalent to 10 centimeters per second, it'll go bonk a little way in, but then come to rest. However, going into Bennu is a bit like going into a pile of ping pong balls, as shown here.
One of Earth's closest neighbors is a dark, jumbled mass
I'm going to.
in the soil. Impact on the asteroid. After a slow descent, the sampler head would briefly make contact, inject a puff of gas, and capture a handful of material. Perhaps it would also leave a small divot at the sample site, a subtle footprint in the soil, or so it was thought. When images of the tag event beamed back to Earth, they were far more dramatic than anticipated. Despite its slow touchdown, OSIRIS-REx had punched through the surface and set off an explosion of loose material. Tons of rocks and pebbles were ejected, radiating outward in a wall of debris. The pictures were stunning, but why did Bennu's surface behave so unexpectedly? The answer involves cohesion, an attractive force that can bind molecules together. Cohesion gives water its surface tension and keeps droplets together even in a microgravity environment like the International Space Station. Granular materials like wheat flour, cocoa, and dust can also exhibit cohesion, which pulls individual grains into clumps. On Bennu, scientists had expected cohesion to act like a bit of glue between the rocks, making its loose surface more solid. But the tag event showed that Bennu's uppermost layers are nearly cohesionless, deforming under stress like a fluid. A good analogy is a ball pit. Although the plastic balls are solid, they easily slide past one another and past boisterous children, behaving in mass like a fluid. Thanks to OSIRIS-REx, we now know that Bennu's surface is not held together by cohesion, but by gravity, or microgravity, with a minute tug less than 100,000th the pull of Earth. On the Moon, gravity is 16% as strong as it is on Earth, and more than 16,000 times stronger than it is on Bennu. As a result, loose material in the lunar subsurface is packed together more tightly, making the Moon's surface relatively firm. If a 50-kilogram mass of solid iron were to hit the Moon at the same speed as the tag event, it would sink into the ground by only half a centimeter. Repeating this experiment at Bennu would yield a dramatically different result. Though the mass would strike with the same force, it would plunge 17 centimeters before stopping, over 30 times deeper than at the Moon. Bennu has consistently defied scientists' expectations, as each new finding reveals another facet of this small but surprising world. Using data from OSIRIS-REx, we now have the ability to look back and accurately recreate 30 seconds on asteroid Bennu. On October 20th, 2020, OSIRIS-REx made its final descent to a sample site called Nightingale. With its tag-SAM arm outstretched, it approached the surface at 10 centimeters per second, the walking pace of an insect. 1 second after contact, it released a canister of pressure particles and driving material into the tag-SAM head for sample collection. 6 seconds after contact, while it was still sinking into Bennu, OSIRIS-REx fired its thrusters to begin the back-away maneuver. The engine burn lasted for 24 seconds, continuously pushing against the spacecraft and rapidly slowing its descent. Flying debris from the thrusters and the gas release pelted the science instruments, clogging them with dust. 9 seconds after contact, when OSIRIS-REx had sunk nearly half a meter into Bennu, it reversed course and began to rise. At 16 seconds, the tag-SAM head re-emerged from the subsurface as the spacecraft continued to accelerate. 30 seconds after contact, OSIRIS-REx shut off its thrusters and drifted away with its sample of Bennu. Almost 6 months later, on April 7, 2021, the spacecraft returned for one last flyover to observe its footprint. At the point of impact was a new crater, averaging 8 meters across and reaching 68 centimeters in depth. Thruster marks overlapped with this tag crater in an X pattern, increasing its volume by as much as 40%. A ridge of ejected material that had been kicked up during sample collection and then fallen back to the surface circled the crater like a campfire ring. With a puff of gas and an engine burn, OSIRIS-REx had displaced 12 cubic meters of granular material, 6 tons of loose rock that may have been packed together as lightly as a bowl of popcorn. After a final departure maneuver in May 2021, OSIRIS-REx began a 2-year journey back to Earth. Stowed on board were about 250 grams of asteroid Bennu, a bounty of scientific treasure destined for future discoveries.
And that's it. Yes.
Hold on, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. It was really brilliant, very in-depth and very comprehensive. Yeah, so I look forward to a lot of new data and information coming through from JWST and all the other things. And that guy, I think, is fascinating. Yeah, right. Yeah, but Andrew's going to do a lecture next week on for 4 hours on the whole subject. So that's it for tonight's presentation. Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to stop the recording now, but we're going to leave the Zoom thing open. You can have a chat to each other if you'd like, and we'll say good night. Yes, Ashley is our IT guy. He's not here at the moment, but he brought all the equipment up for us and helped us set it up and run it here tonight. So thanks, Ashley, much appreciated. Thanks, Mike, for lugging all the gear in and setting up tonight. So it worked out really well. A bit of feedback from people online. Sounds like the audio and video went very well tonight, so that's great. So we really got the things sorted out nicely. So next month is August 22 for the meeting. I'm not quite sure what we've got there, but it should be interesting. It'll be in the lead up just before the supposedly Artemis 1 launch. So it'll be interesting to see how they're going there. Thanks, everyone. See you next month. And this this recording will go up on our YouTube channel in a few days, and we'll put the links on Facebook, etc.